Before we begin, imagine traveling across the galaxy for one simple duty, to bring 18 dead workers home. But when Avery Stone arrives on Veyrion, the bodies are gone. In their place are boxes, legal words, and a company that believes even the dead can belong to it. This is a story about grief, evidence, and the moment humanity tells the galaxy, our dead are not yours to keep. The planet that refused human graves, Avery Stone, first understood the insult from a row of small gray boxes. They waited for her on a steel table inside the cold transfer hall of Caldrus Reach, the capital mining city of Veyrion. Each box was tagged in 3 languages and sealed under quarantine glass. A scorched wedding band, a cracked work watch, a strip of uniform cloth, a dented breathing filter. A miner's name badge burned so badly that only the first 2 letters remained. Behind the table, a wall of frost-white doors stayed locked. Behind those doors were the dead. Avery stood in the middle of the transfer hall with 2 Earth attendants behind her and the black case of repatriation seals at her feet. She was not a soldier, and she was not a diplomat in ceremonial dress. She wore the dark field coat of Earth Posthumous Recovery, the office that crossed borders after accidents, wars, collapses, and disasters to bring citizens home when they could no longer speak for themselves. Her assignment on Veyrion should have been painful, but simple. Confirm the identity of the Hollow 9 workers. Receive their remains. Seal them under Earth chain of custody. Carry them home to the people who had been waiting beside comm screens for 3 days. Veyrion had already sent its formal regret. Orvex Mineral Trust had already sent its casualty numbers. The families on Earth had already been told that their dead were coming home. Then the gray boxes arrived instead. Dallin Voss, senior legal advocate for Orvex, stood across the table with his hands folded behind his back. He was tall, narrow, and almost beautiful in the polished way of powerful people who never had to touch the things they defended. His translator collar rendered his words into clean Earth standard with no tremor at all. Officer Stone, these are the approved personal effects. Orvex Mineral Trust offers its procedural sympathy for your losses. Once you sign the receipt, transfer obligations will be complete. Avery looked past him to the locked doors. Where are the bodies? She asked. The hall cooled another degree, or perhaps it only felt that way. Governor Selka Wren stood near the observation glass, dressed in pale Veyrion civic robes with silver thread at the throat. She had come to witness the exchange personally, which meant the planet already knew this would not be simple. Dallin did not turn toward the doors. The biological remains are not included in the personal transfer. Avery kept her voice even. They are not biological remains. They are Earth citizens. They died under contract in Hollow 9. Their families requested return. Earth-approved return. Your government acknowledged return. Your government requested the return of personal and memorial property, Dallin said. The request was reviewed under Veyrion Labor Code. These items satisfy that obligation. One of Avery's attendants shifted behind her. She heard the movement and raised one hand without looking back. No one would speak before she understood the shape of the trap. Open the doors, she said. Dallin's eyes moved, not to her face, but to the repatriation case at her feet. I cannot do that. Then put the refusal in writing. It already is. He placed a flat document screen on the table and turned it toward her. The first page carried the Orvex seal, the Veyrion labor registry mark, and a phrase Avery had seen once before in old outer belt abuse cases. The screen called the bodies biological debt material. For 1 second, she did not move. There were phrases that revealed a civilization more clearly than monuments or flags. There were phrases built to make cruelty sound clean. Biological debt material was one of them. It meant Orvex was treating the dead as recoverable company value, not as people. Avery read the paragraph below it. Upon termination of contract by death during industrial obligation, recoverable biological value remains under custodial claim of the operating license holder until debt. Balance, contamination risk, evidentiary review, and resource continuity have been resolved. The debt had been moved from people to property in a single sentence. Dallin waited for her to finish. The Hollow 9 workers signed the standard off-world industrial agreement. Veyrion law recognizes Orvex's custodial claim until sterile conversion is complete. Sterile conversion, Avery repeated. Governor Wren finally spoke. Her voice was softer than Dallin's, but not kinder. The procedure is routine. It prevents cross-species contamination and resolves residual biological debt. We understand Earth mourns differently. Veyrion does not interfere with private grief. Sterile conversion meant the bodies would be processed and destroyed. Once it happened, the evidence inside them would be gone too. Avery lifted her eyes from the screen. Private grief? The emotions of families are respected, the governor said. They do not override planetary biosecurity. When is conversion scheduled? Dallin answered, 36 hours from registry denial. Avery looked again at the gray boxes. A wedding band, a broken watch, a name badge, objects arranged like a compromise. If Earth protests, she asked, then the schedule holds. If Earth sends a recovery ship to remove the remains? Dallin's expression did not change. Veyrion will invoke Emergency Contamination Authority. The remains will be destroyed immediately. There it was. Not a refusal, but a hostage line wrapped in law. Avery closed the document screen and pushed it back across the table. I am not signing. Dallin tilted his head. Refusal will delay payment to the families. Orvex cannot close compensation while transfer status remains disputed. One of the Earth attendants drew in a sharp breath. Avery did not. She had spent 11 years listening to companies speak through clauses when they wanted someone else to feel the weight of their greed. You are threatening funeral families with delayed compensation, she said. I am explaining procedure. No, Avery said. You are explaining who you are. For the first time, Dallin's polished calm thinned. Governor Wren stepped forward before he could answer. Officer Stone, Veyrion allowed Earth laborers to work here under lawful contract. Your people accepted our standards when they entered our minds. We did not force them into Hollow 9. Avery looked at the locked doors, then at the small boxes on the table. You accepted their labor, their risk, and their final hours. Now you're refusing their names. Their names remain in employment records. Employment records are not graves. The governor's gaze hardened. There are no human graves on Veyrion. The sentence settled over the transfer hall with the quiet force of a door sealing shut. Avery bent, picked up the repatriation case, and set it on the table. She opened it slowly. Inside were Earth return seals, each marked with a blank line for a name. They had been prepared for bodies, not objects. She placed one seal beside the burn name badge. Then I will stay, she said, until there are. The first warning from Earth arrived less than 20 minutes later. Avery had been moved from the transfer hall into a monitored side office. Veyrion called it a courtesy room, but the door had no inside lock. Director Mara Ellison, head of the Earth Recovery Directorate, appeared on the secure wall channel. Tell me you did not sign, Mara said. Avery stood alone in the room and watched vapor drift from the cooling stacks below the city. The walls were bare. The desk was too low for human posture. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and metal. I did not sign. Mara exhaled once. She was older than Avery by 2 decades, with a face carved by too many disasters and too little sleep. Good. Orvex filed a preemptive notice with the Council Trade Registry. They say Earth is attempting to interfere with a lawful industrial asset. The asset is the bodies. I know. Avery looked at the countdown on her tablet. 35 hours and 12 minutes remained. If we bring in a ship, she asked. Veyrion will destroy the remains under emergency bioauthority. Council patrols would probably back them until review. So no force. No force, Mara said. No breach. No dramatic rescue. If those doors open, they open because the law turns before the furnace does. That was the trap. Avery had already seen. Earth could not arrive with engines hot and soldiers ready. One wrong move would let Veyrion claim contamination panic and burn the dead before anyone could stop them. Avery had to win with names, evidence, law, and time. I need the full Hollow 9 roster, Avery said. Not just Orvex casualty numbers. I need family contacts, contract types, prior complaints, medical restrictions, and all Earth filings on funerary recognition. Funerary recognition was the Council's official acknowledgement that a civilization had funeral rites. Without it, Earth families could mourn, but the Council did not fully protect their right to receive their dead. "You will have them," Mara said. "Avery, there's something else." Mara paused, which meant it was bad. Orvex already contacted some families. They are offering immediate compensation if the families authorize local closure. Avery shut her eyes for 1 second. Before Earth even has the bodies. Yes, they're trying to split them. They're trying to make grief poor enough to sign. Avery opened her eyes. Then we moved faster. When the channel closed, she stayed in the side office and began with the objects. The wedding band belonged to Tomas Reed, pressure engineer, 41, married to a nurse in New Mexico. The broken watch belonged to Kellen Brooks, extraction mechanic, whose older brother had sent 3 messages asking whether Kellen had suffered. The breathing filter belonged to Nina Carver, shift lead, one of the few Earth workers promoted inside Hollow 9. The burn badge belonged to someone whose file had been truncated by Orvex. Its visible letters were Ma. Avery copied the fragment by hand in her notebook. Ma. She never trusted a system that could delete a name faster than a person could write it. 2 hours later, Governor Wren's office summoned her to the local labor registry. The summons used polite language, but the meaning was clear. Veyrion wanted her visible, contained, and far from the cold doors. Avery left the side office with one goal now. She had to prove Orvex was not protecting safety. It was protecting itself. The registry occupied the upper floors of a civic tower above Calder's Reach. Its public halls were bright with water walls and soft mineral light. Beneath the floor, Avery could see the vertical shafts of the mines dropping into darkness through thick transparent panels, as if the city wanted visitors to admire the depth from which its wealth rose. Dallin Voss was waiting with a prepared statement. "Officer Stone, we are willing to provide expanded personal records, provided Earth acknowledges local jurisdiction over biological remains." No, a simple word for a complex legal environment. It is the correct word for theft. Dallin smiled faintly. Theft requires ownership. Veyrion law is clear. Veyrion law also recognizes cultural return for 318 non-native species, Avery said. "I want those files." The smile disappeared. Irrelevant. Then refusal should not matter. Governor Wren joined them at the end of the hall, flanked by civic aides. Those files contain sovereign religious and cultural agreements. They are not open to Earth review. "You are holding Earth dead under a law you say applies neutrally," Avery said. "I'm asking whether it has ever been applied neutrally." Instruat finstigtanat. Earth is not recognized under the Council funerary charter. The sentence was too quick, too practiced. Avery heard the door behind it. "Because Earth has no funerary culture?" she asked. "Because Earth has not completed recognition." Earth applied. Dallin cut in. "Incomplete emotional petitions do not create binding rights." Avery turned to him. "Say that again." Earth's filings were not sufficiently structured for Council classification. "Your practices vary widely. Burial, cremation, sea return, memorial stone, orbital ash. There is no single species standard procedure. That is because humans are not machines," Avery said. "Different families grieve differently." "Exactly," Dallin said. "Private grief, not civilizational law." Avery felt the shape of the case widen. Orvex had not invented the insult at the transfer hall. It had built on a Council failure. Earth had been denied full funerary recognition because the Council wanted one neat ritual, while humans carried their dead in many ways. Before she could press further, a clerk approached with a tray of temporary access bands. One band was marked for Avery. The clerk's hand trembled when she offered it. Avery noticed because people who handled bureaucratic fear often trembled only with one finger. The clerk was Veyrion-born, small and lean, with pale copper eyes and a storage technician's gray collar. Her nameplate read Lyra Senator. When Avery took the band, Lyra's finger tapped twice against the underside of the tray. Then she turned the tray, just enough for Avery to see a tiny mark scratched into the metal. Archive Level 7. Avery did not react. Dallin continued speaking about jurisdiction. Governor Wren continued watching Avery as if waiting for an outburst. Avery gave them neither. She signed the visitor log, accepted a restricted terminal, and spent the next hour requesting records that Veyrion would deny slowly. When the registry lights shifted to second cycle dim, Avery left through the public elevator. Then she stepped out 2 floors early. Archive Level 7 sat below the public registry, where Veyrion kept the records it did not display in the glass halls above. It smelled of old coolant and mineral dust. Sealed injuries, quiet settlements, labor disputes, funeral transfers, and industrial contamination notes waited in the dim storage rows. Lira sen weitet beside alma intenangedorf. You should not have come this directly, Lyra whispered. You invited me directly. I invited you carefully. Then show me what careful looks like. Lyra studied her for a moment, perhaps deciding whether humans were as reckless as Orvex said. Then she opened the door. Inside, old data cabinets rose in dark rows. Lyra led Avery to a terminal disconnected from the public registry. I cannot move files off-site, Lyra said, but I can show you what they did not want you to compare. She opened transfer records from prior accidents. A Thalorian heat worker returned to a crystal shrine. A Namortide engineer released to family water rights. A Vescal rail technician preserved in a pressure capsule for clan return. Each file contained cost, risk, and biosecurity review. Each had been approved. Then came the Earth files. Denied, deferred, reclassified, pending cultural status, labor asset retention allowed. Again and again. Avery leaned closer. How many? On Veyrion? Before Hollow 9, 46 Earth dead across 19 years were never returned. Across Orvex off-world sites, I do not know. The number hit without sound. 46 before the current dead. 46 families had received boxes and explanations, not bodies. Why help me? Avery asked. Lyra looked toward the corridor. Because my brother works in the low districts. Hollow 9 held the pressure line above his housing block. If your workers had run, thousands below would have been poisoned. Orvex buried that detail in an engineering appendix. The workers saved the city? Part of it, Lyra said. Enough that Governor Wren should be standing at those cold doors in gratitude instead of guarding them. Avery took a slow breath. I need that appendix. The appendix is locked under Orvex incident privilege. But there is a survivor. Name, Jonavali, Earth mechanic. He was pulled out before the pressure door sealed. Orvex moved him to a private medical wing. They say it is for his care. It is not. Avery looked at the countdown. 29 hours remained. Can you get me in? Not officially. Good, Avery said. Officially has not been useful. From the archive, Lyra led Avery down service routes toward the medical wing where Orvex had hidden Jonah Vale. The path moved away from the bright civic floors and into the working underside of Cauldrus Reach. Now Avery had to reach the one living witness before Orvex buried him behind contract language. The medical wing sat below the civic tower, not above it. Veyrion hid injured workers in practical places, close to transport and far from public windows. Avery entered through a supply corridor with Lyra's access token and a maintenance hood over her face. She hated the deception, not because it troubled her conscience, but because it gave Dallin Voss a weapon if she failed. He would call it intrusion. He would call it theft. He would stand before the Galaxy Council and make a locked hospital door sound more important than the people behind it. Jonah Vale was awake when she entered his room. He was broad-shouldered and pale from blood loss, with one side of his face marked by pressure bruising. His left arm rested in a healing frame. A guard screen in the corner displayed his contract restrictions in quiet blue text. He looked at Avery's coat first. Earth, he asked. Earth, she said. Avery Stone. Posthumous recovery. His eyes moved past her. You should not be here. I have heard that a lot today. They will cut the settlement. Yours. Everyone's, Jonas said. They made us sign a mutual silence clause after the accident. If any survivor releases protected operational data, Orvex can suspend hardship compensation pending review. Avery pulled a chair close to his bed, but did not sit until he nodded. I'm not here to take something from you, she said. I am here because Orvex plans to destroy the bodies in less than 30 hours. If they do that, they destroy whatever those bodies still prove. Jonah's jaw tightened. They're still in there. Yes. For a moment, he did not look like a survivor. He looked like a man still standing inside the mine. Nina kept the east gate shut, he said. Tomas rerouted the pressure bleed. Kellen carried me until his suit alarms went red. Malik was alive after the first collapse. So was Reed. I heard them on the line. Avery leaned forward. Malik, is it the burn badge? Ma. Jonah closed his eyes. Malik Dana. Vent crew. He sang when the alarm started. Badly. Always badly. Said it kept people from panicking. Avery wrote the name carefully. Malik Dana. Jonah, do you have records? His eyes opened. Fear returned with them. If I give you anything, they will say I broke privilege. They may. Families need that money. Some of them counted on Hollow 9 wages. I know. Do you? His voice roughened. Because it is easy for Earth offices to talk about dignity when someone else misses rent. Avery accepted the hit. It is. That is why I will not ask you to be brave for a speech. I will tell you the cost. If you stay silent, Orvex may pay them. It may also erase the proof of why their people died. Jonah looked at the guard screen. Avery continued more quietly. Then every future contract can use the same clause. More workers will die under it. More families will receive boxes. And if I speak, then Orvex will try to punish you. It will try to punish them. Earth will fight that. I cannot promise clean. I can promise you will not be alone. The answer was not grand enough to comfort him. That was why he believed it. He shifted his good hand beneath the blanket and drew out a thin black data core wrapped in medical tape. Kellen put it in my suit before he shoved me through the service crawl. Jonas said. He said if Orvex wrote the story, we would all die twice. Avery took the core with both hands. Jonah kept hold of it for a moment longer. Bring them home, he said. I will try. No, Hona Guisperth. Do it. They stayed because they thought Earth would come for them. Avery closed her fingers around the core. Outside the room, alarms began to pulse softly. Not emergency alarms. Administrative ones. Lyra looked through the door window, face tight with warning. They know, she said. Avery stood. How long before security reaches this wing? 2 minutes. Jonah tried to sit up. Pain stopped him. Avery placed the data core inside the lining of her field coat. Stay alive. That is your testimony for now. She left through the supply corridor with Lyra ahead of her and security drones turning into the hall behind them. The chase through the medical level was quiet, which made it worse. Veyrion security did not shout. They sealed doors, redirected lifts, and changed access permissions one heartbeat at a time. Avery and Lyra moved through laundry ducts, waste filter rooms, and a narrow service bridge above a shaft where containers rose from the depths like black coffins. They reached Archive Level 7 with one sealed door between them and pursuit. Now the archive was no longer a place to search. It was the only place they could turn Jonah's data core into evidence before Orvex erased it. Lyra connected the data core to the disconnected terminal. I can duplicate part of it before they isolate the floor. Not all. Start with timestamps and audio. The file opened in fragments. Hollow 9 did not look like a mine in the recording. It looked like a throat of metal and stone, pulsing with red warning light. Human voices crossed the channel with varying status tones and the heavy breathing of workers inside sealed suits. Nina Carver spoke first, clear and controlled. East pressure gate is failing. If it opens, lower residences take the gas. Tomas, give me a manual hold. Tomas Reed answered. Manual hold buys 12 minutes. Maybe 15. Kellen Brooks said, then make it 15. Jonah move. Avery watched the timestamps. Orvex's official report declared total loss of contact at 1942 local cycle. The recording continued after that. Malik Dane's voice came through cracked static. He was breathing hard. Then, impossibly, he began to sing a rough earthworks song, badly out of tune. Someone cursed at him. Someone else laughed once, brief and frightened. The recording showed them alive. 20 minutes after Orvex declared no viable signal. 41 minutes. 73. Avery felt the room narrow around the screen. At the edge of the recording, an Orvex operations director spoke on a secure line. Rescue breach risks, main extraction artery. Delay until thermal drop. A second voice asked, survival probability? Declining. Production loss if breach now? Catastrophic. The silence after that was the worst sound in the file. Then the director said, hold rescue. Record no viable recovery window. Lyra covered her mouth. Avery did not move. Fury came to her cold, which was useful. Hot fury wasted time. Copy that segment, she said. The terminal flashed red. Access revoked. Lyra worked faster. I have audio, partial vitals, timestamp discrepancy, and the order to delay. The rest is locked. The archive door shook once under an override attempt. Avery removed the Earth return seals from her case and spread them across the desk. Blank name lines glowed faintly in the emergency light. Print the names, she said. Now, now. Lyra stared at her. If they seize the terminal, they will fight about stolen data, Avery said. But if I carry the names under Earth chain of custody, they have to say what they are trying to. Take. Lyra began printing. Nina Carver, Tomas Reed, Kellen Brooks, Malik Dana, Marin Holt, Saeed Park, Lena Ortiz, Victor Ames, Yoon Haid, Petra Mason, Arun Bell, Imani Cross, Daniel Rowe, Elise Vance, Cole Merritt, Naomi Shaw, Raphael Keane, Priya Soren. Names emerged one by one while the door screamed under pressure. Avery gathered the seals. The door opened. Dallin Voss stood behind Veyrion security with Governor Wren at his side. His face held no anger, only satisfaction. Officer Stone, he said, you are in possession of privileged industrial data. Avery held the seals in plain view. I am in possession of Earth names. You are under local restriction pending council review. On what charge? Interference with sovereign labor process. Theft of protected operational records. Coercion of a medically vulnerable worker. Lyra stepped forward. Avery caught her wrist gently. No, Avery said under breath. Not yet. Governor Wren looked at the seals in Avery's hand. Something like shame moved across her face, but it was too small to become action. Officer Stone, Wren said, you have forced this matter beyond Veyrion. No, Avery said. You did that when you locked the dead behind a company door. Dallin gestured to the security officers. Avery did not resist as they escorted her out. Resistance would give them the image they wanted. She walked through the glass civic halls with the names held against her chest, while Veyrion officials turned away and pretended not to see. By the time she reached the diplomatic holding suite, Orvex had filed a formal complaint with the Galaxy Council. Earth received the summons within the hour. Avery Stone, officer of Earth posthumous recovery, was ordered to appear before an emergency chamber of the Galaxy Council. She would answer allegations of unlawful interference, data theft, and disruption of recognized Veyrion industrial authority. The sterile conversion countdown stood at 13 hours. The Galaxy Council chamber was built to make individual beings feel temporary. Its main floor curved beneath tiers of delegates from worlds Avery had only seen in treaty indexes. Above them floated translation bands, evidence, fields, jurisdiction markers, and old emblems of civilizations that had joined the Council before Earth had mapped its own outer planets. The chamber was not cruel in design. It was worse. It was indifferent. Avery stood at the lower response mark in her field coat, not in ceremonial dress. Dallin Voss stood to her right with Orvex Council behind him. Governor Wren stood to his left beneath the Veyrion planetary seal. Director Mara Ellison appeared on a remote Earth channel, restricted to advisory status because the complaint named Avery personally. High Arbiter Maelys Thorne presided from the central bench. She was not Veyrion, not human, not visibly allied to Orvex. Her species carried age in the silvering of the eyes, and hers looked ancient. This emergency chamber is convened, Maelys said, to review Veyrion's complaint against Earth Officer Avery Stone and to determine whether local industrial custody may proceed during dispute. Not whether the dead were people. Not whether families had rights. Whether custody may proceed. Avery kept her hands still. Maylis turned first to Dallin. Present the complaint. Dallin bowed. High Arbiter, delegates, Orvex Mineral Trust regrets the unfortunate deaths at Hollow 9. We have followed Veyrion law, council trade practice, and the signed agreements of every worker involved. He raised his voice slightly. Officer Stone rejected lawful transfer of personal effects, entered restricted archives, obtained protected operational data, and disturbed a survivor under medical care. Her actions threaten planetary jurisdiction and the stability of cross-species labor agreements across council space. The words were smooth. Avery could hear how they were meant to travel, not as truth, but as a safe path for delegates who wanted the matter to end. Dallin raised a hand, and the chamber filled with contract diagrams. Every Earth worker signed the Off-World Industrial Agreement. Clause 17 confirms that in the event of death during active hazardous obligation, biological remains enter custodial review under the operating license holder. He paused, then continued. This allows contamination control, evidence preservation, and debt reconciliation. The phrase at issue has been mischaracterized by Earth. Biological debt material is a technical category, not an insult. Avery felt Mara Ellison's remote gaze on her, steady as a hand between the shoulder blades. Governor Wren spoke next. Veyrion is not hostile to Earth. We welcomed Earth workers under lawful terms. But we cannot allow one officer to override planetary safety because Earth has emotional customs not yet recognized by the Council. There was again. Emotional customs. High Arbiter Maylis turned toward Avery. Officer Stone, you may respond to the allegations. Avery looked at the delegates, then at the evidence fields, then finally at Maylis. High Arbiter, I will respond. But first, I request emergency suspension of sterile conversion for the Hollow 9 dead. Dallin began at once. Objection. That request assumes jurisdiction not granted. It assumes evidence should not be destroyed while this chamber is deciding whether evidence matters, Avery said. A low ripple moved through the chamber. Maylis lifted one hand. Officer Stone, answer the complaint first. That was the trap. If Avery spent her first minutes defending herself, Orvex would keep the frame. If she led with accusation, the council would call it evasion. She needed to make them hear the real question before they hid inside procedure. This was no longer only about Avery. It was about whether a company could own the dead. She reached in her coat and removed one Earth return seal. It bore the name Nina Carver. This is what I was sent to place on a body, Avery said. Not on a contract, not on an asset, on a body. She held the seal where the chamber could see it. Nina Carver was a shift lead in Hollow 9. Earth informed her family that she would be returned. Veyrion acknowledged receipt of that request. Orvex prepared only her personal effects. Dallin's voice sharpened. This is an emotional display. Avery turned toward him. Read your category aloud. I beg your pardon? Read the category Orvex used for Nina Carver. Dallin looked at Maylis. High Arbiter, this is theatrics. Maylis's silver eyes narrowed. The chamber requests the category. Dallin paused. Biological debt material. Avery placed a second seal in the evidence field. Tomas read. Read his. Dallin did not. Maylis did. Recoverable biological value. Avery placed a third seal into the light. Kellen Brooks. A delegate from Enamortide seats shifted. Another from the Vescal rail block lowered its head. Orvex says this language is technical, Avery said. Earth says language is where erasure begins. Before a company can keep a person after death, it must rename that person into something easier to own. Dallin recovered quickly. The officer ignores consent. These workers signed. They accepted hazard pay. They accepted debt offsets. They accepted local law. Under a council system that never recognized Earth funeral rights, Avery said, other species in Veyrion mines were returned under cultural transfer. Earth workers were not. She sent Lyra's comparison files into the chamber evidence field. The display showed transfer approvals for Thalorian, Namur, Vescal, and 7 other species. Each received funerary return. Each carried biosecurity review. None was held as debt material. Maylis studied the files. Governor Wren, Why were these transfers approved while Earth transfers were denied? Ren's answer was quiet. Those species have recognized funerary status. Earth does not. Avery said, Earth applied. Dallin said, Earth filed inconsistent emotional petitions. Director Mara Ellison's remote image leaned forward. Earth filed civilizational recognition documents in every format requested by council committees. We received no final ruling. Maylis turned toward her. Director Ellison, you are advisory only. Then advised the chamber that Earth did not forget to ask for its dead. The council forgot to answer. The ripple this time was louder. Avery let it settle. High Arbiter, Earth was denied because humans do not all mourn the same way. Some bury, some cremate, some return ashes to water. Some keep names on stone, in songs, in family rooms, or in military fields. That variety does not mean Earth has no funeral culture. It means our grief has many doors. For the first time, several delegates looked away from Dallin's evidence fields and toward Avery's seals. Dallin raised another screen before the chamber could settle. Even if the council wishes to review funerary recognition, that is separate from Officer Stone's misconduct. She stole operational data from a sovereign archive. She coerced a survivor. She now attempts to distract this chamber with grief. Avery had expected this. She had hoped for it. High Arbiter, she said, I request permission to present the survivor. Dallin's expression froze for half a second. Maylis noticed. Jonah Vale is under medical restriction. He is also the last living witness from Hollow 9, Avery said, and Orvex has made his silence part of its evidence. The chamber waited. Maylis gave a small nod. Connect the witness. Jonah Vale appeared above the chamber floor in a medical projection. He looked worse than he had in the hospital room, but his eyes were clear. State your name and role, Maylis said. Jonah Vale, Earth Mechanic, Hollow 9 Maintenance Crew. Dallin stepped forward. Mr. Vale, are you aware that your contract prohibits release of protected operational data? Jonah looked at him. Yes. Are you aware that violation may delay compensation review? Avery saw several delegates turn toward Dallin. He had said it too plainly. Jonah swallowed. Yes. Dallin softened his voice. Then perhaps you should limit yourself to personal recollection. Fine, Jonah said. Personally, Kellen Brooks carried me after my suit cracked. Personally, Nina Carver stayed at the East Gate because if she left, gas would go into the lower city. Personally, Tomas Reed kept the pressure bleed open with his hands on a manual wheel while the metal around him overheated. His voice shook, but he did not stop. Personally, Malik Dane was still singing on the line after Orvex reported us dead. The chamber went still. Avery did not look at Dallin. She looked at Maylis. High Arbiter, I submit the audio timestamps. The evidence field opened. For the first time, the Galaxy Council heard Hollow 9. It heard alarms. It heard breath through damaged filters. It heard Nina Carver ordering workers toward the service crawl. It heard Tomas Reed say, if the gate opens, the city gets it. It heard Kellen Brooks answer, then the gate does not open. It heard Malik Dane singing badly in the dark because terror had entered the mine and someone had decided to push it back with a human song. Then it heard the Orvex operations director. Rescue breach risks main extraction artery. Delay until thermal drop. A second voice asked, survival probability? Declining. Production loss if breach now. Catastrophic. Hold rescue. Record no viable recovery window. No one spoke for several seconds after the file ended. Dallin moved first. The audio is incomplete and unlawfully obtained. Avery said, then preserve the bodies and prove it false. Dallin turned sharply. The bodies are not required to verify operational timing. The suits are. The lungs are. The burn patterns are. The pressure injuries are. The embedded sensor records are. Everything Orvex wants to convert is evidence. Maylis looked to the council forensic clerk. Is that accurate? The clerk consulted quickly. If the audio is authentic, biological and suit evidence may establish survival duration, exposure timeline, and rescue delay. Sterile conversion would destroy or compromise that evidence. The word conversion no longer sounded clean. Not after the chamber had heard living voices from the mine. Dallin said, High Arbiter, Orvex cannot be asked to maintain contamination risk indefinitely based on stolen fragments. Avery answered before Maelys could. You do not fear contamination. You fear testimony from the dead. The words struck the chamber with more force than a shout. Governor Wren looked down. Avery turned to her. Governor, did you know the lower city was saved by the east pressure gate? Wren did not answer. Did you know Earth workers stay to hold it? Still nothing. Did you know Orvex delayed rescue while they were alive? Wren finally looked up. I knew Orvex reported no viable recovery window. And you accepted that because it was convenient. Dallin snapped. Officer Stone is harassing a sovereign governor. Avery faced the chamber again. No, I am asking why a planet that was saved by human workers is trying to burn the proof of their final hours. High Arbiter Maelys lifted both hands. The chamber lights dimmed to review blue. Emergency suspension is granted, she said. Sterile conversion of Hollow 9 remains is halted pending evidence review. Dallin turned toward her. High Arbiter, that exceeds the complaint scope. The complaint scope changed when your own argument made the remains relevant evidence, Maelys said. Avery allowed herself one breath. It was not victory. It was only time. Maelys continued. The chamber will recess for 1 hour. During recess, the council will review Earth funerary filings and Orvex's influence disclosures. Officer Stone, do not mistake this suspension for a ruling on return. I do not, Avery said. Dallin leaned toward her as the chamber began to break. His voice was low enough that the translators caught only part of it. You may stop one conversion, he said. You will not rewrite council labor law with a funeral speech. Avery looked at him. I am not writing with a speech. She held up the seals bearing the names. I am writing with witnesses. During the recess, Earth began to answer. It did not answer with warships. Mara Ellison understood the trap as clearly as Avery did. A single military burn toward Veyrion would let Orvex bury the entire matter under sovereignty panic. So Earth answered in the only language the Council could not easily classify as threat. Civilian signal. The first came from an Earth medical transport waiting outside Veyrion space. Return our dead. Then a freight hauler on a Council trade lane repeated it. Return our dead. Then a water refinery crew near a border moon. A survey station. A rescue tug. A farming habitat. An embassy relay. A deep space repair dock. Not one signal carried a weapons lock. Not one violated traffic law. They simply spoke, one after another, until the Council's public communications map began to glow with human presence. Return or dead. Avery watched the map from a side alcove outside the chamber. Each point was small. Together, they looked like a constellation deciding to have a voice. Mara's image appeared beside the map. It is spreading faster than we expected, Mara said. No government order. Workers started it. Then stations. Then families. Avery kept her eyes on the lights. Orvex will say Earth is applying mob pressure. Let them. It is not a mob. It is a civilization refusing to let a company define grief as trespass. Can we cover the suspended compensation? Yes, Mara said. Emergency relief has been authorized. Orvex cannot starve the families into signatures. For the first time since the transfer hall, Avery felt something in her chest loosen. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. The Council review found your old filings. Some were misrouted. Some were marked incomplete. Some were challenged by industrial blocks. Orvex's name appears more than once. Can you send it? Already did. Avery, this is bigger than Hollow 9 now. It was always bigger. Hollow 9 just gave it names. In the private evidence alcove, Avery opened the older Veyrion cases that Mara had sent. 46 names filled the side display in plain Earth standard. Most were not famous. Most had worked maintenance, hauling, pressure checks, environmental cleaning, tunnel survey, or emergency weld. The kind of jobs that kept a rich city safe without ever becoming part of its official beauty. Each file followed the same quiet pattern. A death report with one paragraph of regret. A family request for return. A Veyrion denial citing local biological custody. An Orvex settlement offer marked expedited if no further claim was filed. Then a closure note that treated silence as consent. Avery stopped at one name, Grace Mar Tunnel Medic. The file said her remains were unavailable due to containment. The attached report said she had died while stabilizing 2 Veyrion workers after a drill fire. Her family had received her gloves, a torn medical pouch, and a phrase Avery now hated more than any insult. Memorial property delivered. Not remains. Not person. Property. Mara watched from the remote channel as Avery scrolled. This is not just Hollow 9, Avery said. No, Mara answered. Hollow 9 is the first time we reached the furnace before they closed the file. Avery felt the weight of the older cases settle beside the 18 current names. The story Orvex wanted was simple. A. Disputed accident. An emotional officer. A legal misunderstanding. The real story had a timeline. It had repetition. It had a business model. Can we verify the old families? Avery asked. We already started. Many never knew council recognition was even an issue. They were told Veyrion law made return impossible. Some were told the remains were unsafe. Some were told nothing useful at all. Do not put them on public channel without consent. I know. Avery closed Grace Mar's file, then copied the pattern summary into her argument notes. She would not use old grief as decoration. But she would not let Orvex pretend Hollow 9 was an exception. At the far side of the alcove, Jonah's medical projection flickered again. He had asked to stay connected, even if he could not speak. His face looked drained, but his eyes tracked the names. I did not know, he said softly. You were not meant to, Avery said. We all heard rumors. Older workers said not to die on Veyrion if you want to go home. We thought it was dark humor. It was policy. Jonah swallowed. Then do not just get ours out. Break it. Avery looked at the 46 closed files, then at the 18 waiting behind frost doors. That is why Orvex is afraid. Mara's voice came through lower. And why the council is careful. If this becomes a charter principle, every operator with a similar clause will be exposed. Some delegates will vote against us simply to protect their own contracts. Then we do not make it only about humans. Mara understood immediately. You make them see that a right denied to Earth today can be priced away for a weaker species tomorrow. Exactly. Avery turned back toward the chamber doors. The recess timer was almost over. For a moment, she allowed herself to think of the families. Not as a crowd, and not as political force. Just separate rooms across Earth where people had left seats empty and messages unanswered because a company had decided the body was negotiable. That was the part council law never measured. It measured contamination risk, transfer cost, jurisdiction, and debt. It did not measure the violence of making someone mourn without the truth. Then she closed the family files. She had enough pain. Now she needed leverage. The chamber reconvened under public observation status. That mattered. The first session had been emergency review. This one was visible across council channels, and the delegates knew it. So did Dallin. High Arbiter Maelys opened with a narrower voice than before. The chamber has reviewed 3 matters. First, the Hollow 9 remains are material evidence. Second, Earth funerary recognition has remained unresolved for an extended period. Third, Orvex Mineral Trust submitted objections to several Earth filings while maintaining labor contracts that benefit from the absence of recognition. Dallin stood. Objections are lawful participation. Orvex is permitted to advise the council on operational impact. Permitted, Maelys said. Not absolved. Avery stepped to the response mark again. Maelys looked at her. Officer Stone, you may present final argument on the question of return. Keep to law. Avery nodded. She had no intention of keeping to anything less. High Arbiter, delegates, Orvex has argued contract. Veyrion has argued jurisdiction. The council has argued classification. Earth will answer all 3. She raised the first evidence file. On contract, a worker may agree to risk. A worker may agree to wages. A worker may agree to hazardous duty. But no fair contract can require a person to become company property after death. She let the sentence sit. If such a clause exists, then the clause proves the system is broken. It does not prove the worker consented to being erased. The second file opened. On jurisdiction, Veyrion has the right to protect its biosphere. But Veyrion approved funerary return for other species under control protocol. She turned slightly toward the delegates. It denied Earth not because Earth posed a unique risk, but because Earth lacked a council label. Biosecurity became a convenient word for unequal dignity. The third file opened. It showed Earth petitions across years. Burial practices, cremation practices, sea memorials, family return, military repatriation, civilian disaster recovery, records from desert villages, ocean cities, orbital habitats, mountain, towns, refugee settlements, and Mars-born communities. Different rituals. Same principle. The dead were not abandoned. Avery let the chamber look before she spoke. On classification, Earth was told its practices were inconsistent. That is true. Humans do not all grieve the same way. No one interrupted. Some bury. Some burn. Some scatter ashes. Some keep names on stone. Some keep names in song. Some carry a ring, a uniform patch, a photograph, or a recorded voice. She looked across the tiers. The variety is not proof that humanity lacks funeral culture. It is proof that humanity refuses to make one kind of grief the price of being recognized as civilized. She placed all 18 return seals into the evidence field. The names formed a slow circle of light. These people were not perfect symbols. They were workers. They were tired. They were underpaid by council standards. Some took the Hollow 9 contract because Earth jobs could not pay enough. Some wanted to clear family debt. Some wanted to see another world. Her voice stayed even. Some probably signed clauses they did not fully understand because the alternative was going home with nothing. Orvex calls that consent. Earth calls it leverage. Dallin's jaw tightened. Avery continued. But in their final hour, when the east pressure gate failed, they did something no clause required. They stayed. They saved Veyrion lives. They saved a district that will never know their faces unless this council allows their names to survive. She turned toward Governor Wren. Governor Wren, Veyrion says there are no human graves on your planet. Perhaps there should not need to be. Perhaps all Earth families want is to bring their dead home. But if your city stands because human hands held a failing gate, then the least your planet owes them is not ownership. It is release. This time she did not look away. Avery faced the council bench. High Arbiter, the question before you is not whether Earth grief is emotional. Of course it is. The public gallery was silent now. So is every shrine in this chamber's member worlds. So is every memorial fleet, every ash, lake, every bone archive, every ancestral signal, and every silence kept for the dead. Avery let the words reach the upper tiers. The question is whether emotion becomes invalid only when it belongs to humans. She lowered her voice. If the answer is yes, then say it plainly. Say Earth workers may die for council supply lines, but may not be returned to Earth families. Say a company may take their labor in life and their bodies in death. No one moved. Say the council recognizes profit faster than mourning. Say humanity is useful, but not civilized enough to bury its own. Melis's eyes did not move. But if the answer is no, Avery said, then return our dead. Not as a favor, not as an exception, as a right. Dallin stepped forward quickly, perhaps sensing the chamber had shifted beyond procedural safety. High Arbiter, Orvex cannot accept retroactive invalidation of lawful contracts. Such a ruling would destabilize hazardous labor across council space. Operators must know that signed agreements remain enforceable. Avery turned to him. Hazardous labor will survive without owning corpses. A sharp sound came from one of the upper tiers. It might have been approval. It might have been shock. Dallin pressed on. If emotional claims can override contract, every species will demand exemptions. A Namur delegate rose from the tied seats. Her voice flowed through the translator like deep water. My species already has such exemption. Orvex never called it emotional when applied to us. A Vescal Rail delegate stood next. Our dead are returned under pressure capsule at great expense. Veyrion approved it. We were told humans had no equivalent right. We did not ask why. We should have. One by one, not all, but enough, delegates began to request recognition of review. Not because they loved Earth. Not because they trusted humans fully. Because Avery had forced them to see the unequal line, and none wanted to stand publicly on the wrong side of it. Governor Wren rose last. Dallin turned toward her, alarmed. Governor. She ignored him. Veyrion accepted Orvex's report that there was no viable recovery window, she said. The evidence presented challenges that report. Until investigation concludes, Veyrion withdraws its objection to preservation and release under joint custody. Dallin stared at her, as if she had broken contract with reality. Avery knew the statement was careful. Wren was not confessing. She was surviving politically, but it moved the door. High Arbiter Meles called the chamber to order. The council will rule. The lights above the bench shifted from review blue to judgment white. First, sterile conversion of the Hollow Nine remains is permanently barred. Second, the remains and associated suit evidence will transfer to Earth custody under Council forensic observation. Meles looked toward the public record field. Council forensic observation means neutral council examiners will watch the transfer, preserve evidence, and prevent either side from altering what remains. Dallin's council team erupted in objections. Meles lifted one hand, and the translation field cut them down to silence. Third, she continued, Orvex Mineral Trust is placed under investigation for rescue delay, evidence suppression, and improper influence on funerary recognition proceedings. Avery did not move. Fourth, the council recognizes an emergency principle pending full charter codification. No contract may convert the remains of a sentient worker into owned industrial material. No operating license holder may withhold the dead for debt reconciliation. No member system may deny controlled returns solely because a civilization's mourning practices vary within its species. Avery felt Mara Ellison go still on the Earth Channel. Meles looked directly at Avery. The emergency principle will be entered as the right of return for the dead. The name crossed the chamber slowly. The right of return for the dead meant the dead could not be held as company property. They had to be returned to their family, their people, or their civilization under lawful protection. For a moment, Avery heard nothing. Not the chamber, not Dallin, not the public signals. Only the bad singing in the Hollow Nine audio and Jonah's voice saying they stayed because they thought Earth would come. Meles finished the ruling. Veyrion will release the Hollow Nine. Dead within 6 standard hours. Earth will receive them by name. This chamber is adjourned. The cold transfer hall of Cauldrus Reach looked different when Avery returned. The same steel table waited under the same white lights. The same wall of frost doors stood at the far end. But the doors were no longer silent behind company authority. Council forensic observers stood beside Earth attendants. Veyrion civic officers stood farther back, uncertain where to put their hands. Dallin Voss was not there. Governor Wren was. She approached Avery as technicians prepared the first container. Officer Stone, Wren said, I will not pretend this ruling is easy for Veyrion. Avery watched the technicians check the seal. No one asked for easy. The lower city has begun asking for the names. Avery turned then. Wren's face carried the strain of someone whose public order had cracked and shown something underneath. They heard the Hollow Nine audio. Many did not know. Will you tell them? Yes. It was not enough. It was something. The first frost door opened. Cold air rolled into the hall. The container emerged on a silent track, no longer marked as biological debt material. A council observer read the updated custody file. Nina Carver, Earth citizen, shift lead, Hollow Nine, released for return. Avery stepped forward and placed the Earth seal on the container. For Nina, the line was steady. For Tomas Reed, her hand shook once. For Kellen Brooks, she remembered Jonah's voice and pressed the seal down with both palms. For Malik Dane, she paused over the name because the burned badge had nearly lost him. Then she sealed him under his full name, not the 2 surviving letters Orvex had left behind. One by one, the containers came out. Marin Holt, Saeed Park, Lena Ortiz, Victor Ames, Yoon Haid, Petra Mason, Arun Bell, Imani Cross, Daniel Rowe, Elise Vance, Cole Merritt, Naomi Shaw, Raphael Keane, Priya Soren. 18 dead, 18 names, 18 returns. Lyra's son stood near the archive clerks, eyes bright but dry. Jonah Vale watched through a medical channel from his bed, his injured hand pressed against the screen. When the last seal was placed, Avery closed the repatriation case. It was empty now, which meant it had done its work. Governor Wren spoke quietly. There may be a memorial in the lower city. Not a grave. A marker, if Earth permits it. Avery thought of the sentence Wren had spoken in the hall before everything changed. There are no human graves on Veyrion. Ask the families, Avery said. Not Earth as an institution. Ask the people whose names were on the waiting lists. If they agree, use the workers' full names. No species category. No labor rank. Full names. Wren nodded. Full names. The return ship lifted from Caldrus Reach under civilian clearance, not military escort. That mattered to Avery. The dead had been taken through law. They would be returned through law changed in their names. From orbit, Veyrion looked serene, blue, white, and gold-veined, its mining scars hidden beneath cloud bands and civic light. Avery watched it shrink through the observation glass until it became another world behind them. Mara Ellison joined her near the glass. The director had arrived on the council relay ship after the ruling, too late to argue and just in time to carry the cost home. Public channels are impossible to count, Mara said. The phrase is everywhere now. Return our dead? That too. But I meant the right of return. Smaller species blocks are already asking whether it applies to them. Labor offices are panicking. Companies are pretending they supported it from the beginning. Avery almost smiled. Of course they are. Orvex shares are collapsing. Good. Mara looked at her. You know the investigation will be ugly. It should be. And slow. It will still have bodies to examine because we got there before the furnace. Mara nodded. For a while they stood without speaking. Behind them, in a secured return bay, the 18 containers rested in 2 rows. No company codes faced outward. No debt marks. No euphemisms. Just names, dates, and the Earth custody seal. Avery had brought back bodies before. Soldiers from border fires. Engineers from failed domes. Settlers from cracked habitats. Disaster victims whose families waited so long that grief became a discipline. Each return had weight. This one carried something else, something larger and more dangerous. A law had changed because a company had tried to own the dead. But Avery knew better than to call a clean victory. Nina Carver was still dead. Tomas Reed was still dead. Kellen Brooks would not laugh again. Malik Dane would never sing badly in a safe room where friends could tell him to stop. The families would receive truth and remains, but not the people they wanted. Justice did not reverse loss. It only refused to let loss be used again. The journey home was quiet for reasons no one needed to explain. The ship crew moved softly around the return bay, not with superstition, but with a respect older than spaceflight. The dead did not need silence. The living did. Avery spent most of the passage checking names against family records. She corrected one misspelled middle name, one old address, and one labor file that had reversed a family contact order. Small errors, but after Veyrion, small errors felt like the first crack in a wall that could become erasure. Jonah sent a message before the ship crossed the outer relay. He did not ask her to play it publicly. It was for the families if they wanted it. In it, his voice shook, but he did not hide from what he remembered. He told Tomas Reed's husband that Tomas had kept counting pressure intervals until the last line failed. He told Nina Carver's father that Nina had given the final evacuation order and made it sound so calm that no one realized she had already chosen to stay. He told Malik Dane's sister that Malik's song was terrible, absolutely terrible, and that everyone in the dark had needed it more than air for 1 minute. Avery listened once for chain of custody, then sealed the message. She did not listen again. Some words belonged to the people who had earned them. In the return bay, Mara found her with the manifest open. You corrected the address for Marin Holt, Mara said. Her file listed an old off-world work hostel. Her sister updated the Earth registry 6 months ago. Orvex never copied it. Most people would not notice that after a council ruling. That is how they become numbers again. One wrong address at a time. Mara did not argue. She had trained Avery years ago, when Avery still believed recovery work was mostly logistics. It had taken only one collapsed colony dome to teach her otherwise. A name placed on the wrong container could wound a family twice. A sentence spoken too quickly could make a spouse feel processed instead of met. A missing personal effect could become the thing someone searched for in dreams. This was why Avery had never wanted command of ships or fleets. Ships could force open borders. They could not teach a clerk to write a name with care. Mara looked through the glass at the sealed containers. You know, people will call this a human victory. It is, and also not enough. Avery closed the manifest. A victory that still has bodies in the room is never enough. But it can stop the next theft. The first family gathering happened at the Earth orbital return port 3 days later. Avery stood at the rear of the receiving hall, not on the platform. She hated platforms at returns. They made grief face the wrong direction. The hall was simple by design. No flags above the families. No heroic music. No giant screens. Just a clear path from the docking doors to the receiving circles, and enough silence for names to be heard. Mara read the formal return statement. Because someone had to, she kept it short. Earth receives the Hollow 9 dead by name, under the protection of the right of return. They were workers. They were rescuers. They were ours. They are home. Then the names were read again. Not as evidence this time. As return. Avery watched Tomas Reed's husband place both hands on the container and bow his head. She watched Kellen Brooks's brother take the broken watch from the personal effects box and hold it like it was still keeping time. She watched Malik Dane's sister laugh once through tears when Jonah's recorded message described the singing. Because grief had room for anger and love at the same time. Jonah Vale attended remotely from Veyrion medical care. When his face appeared on a small private screen, several families turned toward him. Avery worried for a moment that they would ask him why he lived when the others did not. They did not. Nina. Carver's father stepped forward first. You came back, he told Jonah. Jonah broke then, not loudly, just enough that everyone saw what survival had cost him. They sent me, he said. No one needed more. Avery moved toward the exit before the families began private rites. Her work ended where their mourning began. At the door, Mara stopped beside her. You should stay, Mara said. They may want to thank you. Avery looked back at the receiving circles. This is not my room anymore. Mara accepted that. Where will you go? There are 46 older Veyrion cases. We need to reopen them. Then Orvex sites beyond Veyrion. Then every contract that used the same clause. Mara sighed, not with defeat, but recognition. You're going to make many people hate your office. They already hated us when we were quiet. Avery stepped into the corridor. Beyond the port glass, Earth turned slowly under the light. It was not the center of the galaxy. It was not the oldest world, or the richest, or the most feared. It was a blue planet full of people who argued over rituals, names, songs, ashes, stones, oceans, and soil. It was inconsistent. It was stubborn. It carried its dead in 1,000 ways. And now the Galaxy Council had been forced to recognize that this was not weakness. It was civilization. Avery walked away from the receiving hall with the empty repatriation case in one hand and the list of older missing dead in the other. Behind her, families spoke names that Orvex had tried to turn into categories. Ahead of her, more locked doors waited on more worlds, behind cleaner words and older laws. She knew they would not open easily. But Hollow 9 had changed the sentence. There had been no human graves on Veyrion, because Veyrion had believed human grief needed permission. Now every company, governor, and council clerk knew better. Humanity did not ask the galaxy to worship its dead. It did not ask strangers to understand every rite, every prayer, every silence, or every song. It asked for one thing only, and after Hollow 9, it asked with a voice no contract could bury. Return our dead. The galaxy had taken their labor, their breath, and their final hours. It had. Tried to take their names as well. But Earth came back for them. And from that day on, no human grave needed permission to exist. For every world that watched in silence, Avery Stone left behind a warning no empire could bury. Humanity does not measure civilization by the height of its towers, the size of its fleets, or the cold perfection of its laws. We measure it by what a people will still protect when there is no profit left. A name, a promise, a body brought home, a grave that no system has the right to deny. So the next time the Galaxy Council speaks of Earth as young, emotional, or easy to overlook, they will remember Veyrion. They will remember the workers of Hollow 9. And they will remember the day humanity stood before the stars and said one simple thing. Our dead are not yours to keep. If this story moved you, take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who loves powerful science fiction, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about Earth, humanity, and the moments when ordinary people force the galaxy to remember what dignity really means. And if you're still here at the end, thank you. Stories like this only matter when someone is willing to listen all the way through.